In this week's Motorweek, Francesca Robinson drives the superb BMW M5. Chris Goffey takes a look at the new Volkswagen Sharan. And Richard Hammond goes off-road in the Grand Cherokee.
A jet fighter might be a long way from a load-lugging estate car, but this particular one can just about claim to be related, because it can trace its ancestry back to a time when Saab decided to use up their spare staff by turning them from making aircraft to building cars. And as a result, their cars have always boasted the highest levels of engineering, as well as being slightly, well, quirky in a Swedish way. Then there's the second of our Swedish offerings, the Volvo. It can trace its ancestry back to, well, an old wardrobe, probably from the looks of most old Volvos. But they have built a very well-deserved reputation for constructing the most durable, long-lived and practical of estate cars on the market. Cars that have, over the generations, carried families on holiday, antique traders and travelling salesmen. And like the Saab, they seem to go on forever and ever. In some cases, the only way to age an old Volvo or a Saab is to cut a slice off the exhaust pipe and count the rings. The Saab has been on sale for about a year now. The Volvo went on sale only recently, and the difficulty for fans of Swedish cars is going to be in choosing between the two of them, because they are very much pitched head-to-head in the marketplace. It's a case, if you like, of how do you like your Swede, sir? The first thing to hit you when you get into the Saab is just how comfortable these seats are. You really do get the impression that this aircraft is club class. Thank you very much. And that impression is bolstered by the presence of this little card that we find in the car, giving us details of the car's safety. But I keep expecting to face backwards and address my passengers for where the exits are in case of emergency. Or is that just me? Good news too when it comes to the amount of kit, because they certainly don't let you down. There's more than enough luxury touches in here. The climate control is particularly easy to use and very effective. And there are some nice little touches as well, like this cup holder. Wow! Somebody's put some real thought into that. It's not just a throwaway item. For my money, certainly it's the most stylish of the two interiors, and typically Saab, with the instruments banked in front of you. You feel very much like you're in control of an aircraft. And one other typical Saab feature as well, the ignition key mounted down here on the transmission tunnel. They've always done it, and it looks like they always will. It does mean you can lock the gearbox as well. Oh, hello. Do I hear the sound that could mean the captain's put the seatbelt warning lights on? Must be getting ready for takeoff. The Saab actually has the smaller engine of the two. It's just 2.3 litres and only 4-cylindered, compared to Volvo's 5 cylinders and 2.4. But the Saab is actually more powerful. It has an extra 30 bhp and it does feel faster than the Volvo. There's barely any turbo lag in here, and that's not surprising really, because Saab have been fiddling around with turbos since the 70s, so you'd expect them to get it right. In fact, the only interruption in the acceleration comes from waiting for kickdown on the automatic gearbox. The best way to enjoy your 9.5 estate is to sit back, calm and unruffled. Think club class again on a long intercontinental flight. Just reserve that acceleration for takeoff and maybe a bit of overtaking. But be warned, when you do come to land, you might find the brakes are a bit of a surprise. It's not that they're not there, they are, but you will have to give the pedal a bit of a prod. There's good news in store for rear seat passengers in the Saab, because there's loads of room and it's really comfortable as well. And then the boot space, well, it's every bit as cavernous as you would demand in any estate car in this class. But there's more to it than that, because we get this extremely nifty hard luggage cover, and then this very clever system of nets and these movable anchor points to which you could tie up ships if you really felt the need to. All well and good, but surely, if it's practicality and space you want, it's got to be a Volvo. It's been that way for hundreds of years. Well, yes and no. For a start, this luggage cover, forget it, horrible thing. There are anchor points, but they're only in the corners. There aren't a whole rack of them like in the Saab. There is a nice little space here, good news for smugglers, as long as customs are particularly gullible. And that's about it. In the back, well, plenty of space for your passengers here. And again, it's nice and comfortable, but there could be a bit of a disappointment in store here compared to the 9.5. everything's in here, it's just not as engaging or as special feeling as in the Saab. Now, I'm actually quite a fan of these simple, solid slabs of controls that Volvo seem to be turning out, but I know plenty of people find it, well, rather Euro bland. They have been to the same school of cup holder manufacture, though. Look at this beauty. Yeah, it's the kind of thing that would finally make you talk in a torture chamber. Whatever you say. So, despite those extra cubes, the Volvo loses out on power, and it does feel quite a lot slower than the Saab. It's another light-pressure turbo, and this time there is turbo lag. In fact, that seems to be the only effect of it. The turbo basically flattens the bottom end and brings no particular benefits. So it loses out in terms of power. It loses out as well when it comes to the seating position for the driver and the passenger. The seats feel flabby. They're nowhere near as firmly padded and ergonomically shaped as those of the Saab. So more points down there. Then all of a sudden the Volvo starts to claw back points, and it does it in a most un-Volvo-like way. Because chuck this big barge through a series of corners and you'll be amazed. It goes round them really well, really fast. It feels glued down. The chassis is extremely well sorted for a car of this size. To chuck an estate car through a series of bends, this has got to be the one. When it comes time to draw things to a halt though, be warned again. Unlike the Saab, when you have to give the brakes a hefty prod, do the same in this and you'll be pulling your eyeballs back out of the air vents. It stops immediately. If anything, they are far too fierce. It's very difficult to be sensitive. Great news in an emergency, bad when you pull up 30 feet short of a junction. So, rather than being just a straightforward battle between two very similar cars, it's become apparent that each of these is going to appeal to really a very different buyer. In essence then, it boils down to this. If you need an estate car capable of hustling along your favourite stretch of B-road with the biggest payload on board, then the Volvo is your thing. But if you want a cross-continental tourer with a wonderful burst of acceleration and that cosseting ride, it's got to be the 9.5. It wins as well in terms of build quality and arguably style. So that's it, the Saab emerges top Swede. Just.
The Daleks, Godzilla, Darth Vader, Dracula, Frankenstein, Hannibal Lecter. What have all these got in common? Well, one thing is, they're all monsters. Well, let me introduce you to another monster. Yes, you're right, doesn't look like one. It's a saloon car, and it's made by BMW. Let me say this again, this car is a beast, and one of the few clues to give it away is the badge at the back. Still not convinced? The only way I can prove it to you is to take it for a drive. Now, once you get behind the wheel and fire this baby up, the car starts to exert a certain force on you. It's almost subliminal. You can't feel it, you can't see it, but you know it's about to happen. The only way I can describe it is by calling it the Jekyll and Hyde effect. And no matter how mild-mannered, strong-willed or restrained you are, you will succumb. You will succumb. Hide. No. Jekyll. Hide. Jekyll. Hide. No, Jekyll. Hide. Jekyll. Hide. The M5 at first glance seems understated. It looks like a normal 5 Series saloon, but looks can be deceptive. There are clues throughout. Big wide multi-spoke 18-inch wheels, a slightly deeper front spoiler, and the quad exhaust tailpipes, all indications to its illustrious heritage. This car belongs on the open road. It needs to be driven. No, it begs to be driven, and driven hard. It's like a wild animal fighting to be released, and all you have to do is put your foot down and hear that engine roar. The performance is staggering. The 5-litre V8 400 brake horsepower engine will catapult you from 0 to 60 in about 5.1 seconds, if you can find a road grippy enough, while the top speed is limited to a mere 155 miles per hour. With all that power and a weight of nearly 2 tons, you need some stopping power. And BMW have fitted the biggest brakes on a 5 Series to date. And boy, do they work well. I didn't know they were that good. Now, if all that isn't enough for you, there's always the sport mode. No, please, not the sport mode. By simply pressing this switch, the car takes on a whole new set of characteristics. It's almost like finding out the spotty boy next door's a stormtrooper for the SAS. The steering becomes heavier, the car seems more firmly rooted to the road, and the performance is even more responsive. Don't ask me how it's all done. All I know is you no longer have a beast on your hands, but a monster with a serious attitude problem. One feature I really like is the way the mirror tilts down when you're reversing. It's to stop you hitting the curb when you're parking. That's nice, but what happens when you overshoot your exit on the motorway, which you will do in this car with the speeds it's capable of? I mean, it's going to be a real bugger trying to see when you're reversing up the hard shoulder. It's not going to be much use then, is it? See, it's this car giving me all this attitude. This car just inspires confidence. The steering is impeccable, acceleration savage in any gear, and you know you can corner with confidence with those big wheels firmly planted on the road. Oh no, I think I'm falling in love with this monster. I need to get out. I need to think straight. I've just got to get my breath back. Now, I need to get out. Oh my God, I've got to think straight. BMW don't use the M badge on just any old car. The M stands for BMW's Motorsport department. There have been 2 previous M5s, both straight 6s. The last M5 was killed off in 1995, so it may have taken a while, but the wait was definitely worth it. So why did BMW make this car? I think it's because they can. They just love a challenge to build the best performance saloon car in the world. Do you know, this car's not like a monster at all. It's like Muhammad Ali in his prime. Beautiful, elegant, fierce, knocking out all the competition. So watch out, you rivals, because this car floats like a butterfly and stings like a bee.
Cool.
You know, I like that last bit, but can't I just say it's the dog's bollocks?
After the break, Chris Goffey in the new look Volkswagen Sharan. But is it new look enough?
Well, this, they tell me, is the new Sharan. They had to tell me it was the new Sharan because apart from the grille and the bonnet and headlights, it looks pretty much exactly the same as the last one. What's new about it? Well, apparently it's got a brand new interior that makes the inside of the Sharan a, quote, delightful place to be. Is that true? Let's find out. Well, yes, here's a new dashboard, new little storage bins on top, familiar Volkswagen Venetian blind air vents, and yes, a very Volkswagen looking dashboard with the familiar red and blue instrument lighting a la Amsterdam nightclub. And according to the press release, there's a new umbrella holder and new coat hangers. Wow! Quite interested to drive this car because the rumour mill says Dr. Piet, the feared #1 man at Volkswagen, never really liked the Sharan. That's probably because it was built in a joint project factory in Portugal with Ford. The idea being the factory produced the Ford Galaxy, the Volkswagen Sharan and the Seat Alhambra. Now Piëch never liked the idea of sharing something with Ford, and last year Volkswagen brought out the whole caboodle, and this is the first product of the new factory. Apparently he likes this a lot better. Four-wheel drive is optional on the V6 and the most powerful diesel, and a 5-speed automatic Tiptronic transmission will be optional later this year. One of the buzzwords of the motor industry is niche marketing. Everybody's looking for that little special slot for their car. Well, this is a niche within a niche, a high-performance MPV, because this Sharan is fitted with the V6 2.8-litre engine. Used to be called the VR6 that everybody knew, but for some reason they've dropped the R. I think that's a mistake, because there is a V6 in the Volkswagen range derived from the Audi. Still with me? Anyway, the VR6 in this, as was, now develops 204 brake horsepower that makes this Sharan a very rapid device indeed. Nothing much has changed in the ride and handling department. You feel as though you sit high in the car with a good view out over the traffic around you. It feels very car-like, not as much roll as you might expect, and for a vehicle that could be called on to handle a hefty load, compliant and smooth suspension settings. People carriers are undoubtedly a growing part of the UK market, but the big question, which particular sector? Because the research indicates some drivers, especially women, still think these things are too big and bulky for everyday use. And the smaller MPVs, led of course by Renault's Scenic, which was a runaway success, are going to dominate. Vauxhall are hoping for success with their Zafira, Citroën have introduced the Picasso, Volkswagen are going to introduce an MPV version of the Golf very soon. And it's those cars that many industry pundits say will be leading the market.
Just where does it come from, this strange urge that overwhelms otherwise sensible middle-class people to take to the streets aboard huge pieces of Americana built for a place entirely alien to us? This is not America. America is a place where fuel is cheaper than water, and the only corner your car is required to negotiate in a journey of 1,000 miles is the one into the sweeping driveway in front of your mock Georgian mansion. So this fixation must be some sort of madness, surely. Well, one car from over there that's doing really rather well over here is this, from Chrysler Jeep, the Grand Cherokee. Grand meaning big, and boy is it. Now this ain't no namby-pamby soft roader. This is actually a very capable all-terrain vehicle. Oh yes sirree. And if its rugged good looks aren't enough to convince you of that, then a quick glance down the spec sheet will do. In this, the limited edition Grand Cherokee, it would be shorter to make a list of things that you don't get. And I can't think of any. Air conditioning, electric seats and a 10 CD auto changer are to be found scattered around the very comfortable cabin. But let's face it, that's about as much as its off-road features will ever be. Just a selling point, facts and figures on a spec sheet. Something to boast about to the other ladies and chaps who lunch down at the tennis club. Maybe it's a power thing, the desire to take control and dominate what is undeniably a very big beastie indeed. And I don't just mean the bulk and size of the thing physically, the engine. A 4.7 litre V8. It'll go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in around 8 seconds. That's madness. The closest thing I can think of is it must be like those poor people whose bungalows are undermined by subsidence and drop off the edge of a cliff. Sitting in a bungalow falling off the edge of a cliff, as it hits terminal velocity, probably feels a bit like flooring this thing. so to driving the thing. Well, it's an off-roader, so taut and pinned to the tarmac is not on the menu. Nevertheless, it's not as rock and roll as you might think. There's quite a surprising amount of body control. It's perhaps only let down by the rather chunky hybrid off-road on-road tyres, but you don't feel like you're about to bounce off the first corner and up the nearest tree. Of course, it's not all image for image's sake. There are a few really practical points here. There's no doubting the car's ability to get you out of trouble should you indulge in any kind of off-road excursion. But there's also tons and tons of room. The boot's plenty big enough, unlike its smaller sibling, the Cherokee, which is, well, a little challenged in the load space area. There's also plenty of space in the cabin, and no shortage of creature comforts either. Should you ever need to tow anything as ghastly as a caravan, you can. Several, probably. Okay, sure. So most owners probably never will romp across the field in their Grand Cherokee like a V8 gas-guzzling four-wheel drive version of The Hills Are Alive to the sound of music. It's a lifestyle thing like muesli and wearing running shoes in everyday life. So most Cherokees will never actually have their off-road abilities tested to the limit. Fine, 4x4s don't. Then neither do coupes. Find me a coupe or a sports car that is ever legally, anyway, fully taken to the limit of its abilities. No, it's more about comfort and practicality and something that's a bit different. As long as there are people who are prepared to pay that bit extra for something that does stuff they might not need, but looks good, there'll be cars like the Grand Cherokee. Now, off-road, on-road. Off-road, on-road. It is very bumpy off-road. I think we'll go on-road. Just this once.
In next week's show, Ginny Buckley drives the sexy SLK and Chris Goffey gets sporty in the new Seat Cordoba.